Hello, hi. We are back again with another fireside chat with one of my good friends, Chirag Joshi. He's a founder, CEO, Seven Rules Cyber. And here's the interesting thing. He's one of the best-selling authors. His ambitious goal is a very simple one, where he wants to enable human progress through trust in technology. So he wants to help build a world where there is trust in digital systems, protect against cyber threats, and have safe environment online for communication, commerce, and engagement. I've interacted with him personally, and I find him very passionate. And he's very passionate, and he is concerned about safety of children and vulnerable sections of society online. So he's a very motivated person. He has delivered several lectures, keynote speeches, and he also has his own blogs, and he writes a lot. Right? So he has a lot of experience. So the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to have a conversation with Chirag on the topic from blockers to breakthroughs. How do we overcome the divide between the business and cybersecurity for success? And I think we continue to talk about different types of divides in the society, financial divides and various other divides. And, people are divided even by thoughts. And I agree with Chirag that there is a divide in every organization when it comes to decision making or making certain operational decisions. So I also recently came across some statistics, right? And I was trying to figure out where this survey was done, but I only could refer to HelpNet Security, where the article discusses that when you do not combine, or what the respondents are saying is 89% of the respondents stated that the disconnect between business and security goals appears to have caused at least one negative consequence. Now, most of the surveys which we have online, and we see so many reports, and it is only a fragmented section in the corporate world who participate in the survey. And we only extrapolate the numbers. And if you look at these 89% of the respondents, and I think they had only about less than 1,000 people who participated in the survey. And if 89% people mentioned that they had one incident, one negative consequences because of the divide, that's a serious discussion. So with that thought, Chirag, I'm going to ask you, why do we have a disconnect between business and decision makers, and especially the chief information security officers and his or her office? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Firstly, Sujith, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and a big hello to your viewers and the audience. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So look, I think we've touched upon a really important point to start with. Why does the disconnect exist? So in a very simple way, and I was thinking about this, on how to kind of simplify this message, and I posted a video on LinkedIn. So I speak multiple languages, and as I'm sure you do, Sujit, and in the native language, which is Gujarati, I just said something which was, I'm trying to explain something to you, but you just don't understand. What do I do? Now, the point of me saying it was in Gujarati was, if you don't speak Gujarati, no matter how nicely I said it in that language, how articulately I would have said it, you wouldn't have understood it. It would have made no sense to you. So I think the problem is you got to understand the language difference between the two areas. So a business executive, what are they focused on? What do they want to concern themselves with? they don't want to concern themselves necessarily with understanding the nuances of IT and cybersecurity. They don't want to concern themselves with understanding what zero trust is or what MDR, EDR, throughout an acronym that we use in cybersecurity is. They are concerned with growing the business, financials, products, services, customers, managing the risk, investing appropriately, investing for growth, investing to make sure that they're doing the right thing, and giving confidence to the board, giving confidence to the stakeholders, ensuring that the people they have committed to delivering products and services get it on time in the way that they expect it. That's the focus area. That's where the business is focused on. Now, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has a critical role to play in ensuring that all of these things happen and they happen securely. The trust aspect is such a key part. In this world that we live in, trust is the vital thing, is the currency. Because if you don't trust something, especially now with all the changes in artificial intelligence and deep fakes and all the news that we keep hearing, being able to trust something is such a vital thing. And once you lose that trust, studies have told us that it's really hard to regain that in a reasonable manner, and that leads to all kinds of problems. So cybersecurity is focused on ensuring that things are deployed securely, they're designed properly, they're operating well, the threats are managed, the risks are managed. So they have an enabling role to play. The problem can start occurring when they're not talking to each other in a language they understand, and that's what I start with. So I'll first start with cybersecurity because that's the side of fence I am on, right? Now, if you are talking to your business and all you are talking to them is a perception of, well, here are the vulnerabilities that exist. I need to deploy a PAM tool. I need more money and more resources to go out and build a security operations center. Think it from a business perspective. They're lost. Why is it a problem? How can my investment help? Haven't I invested enough already? Why are you always stopping me from doing my job? Don't you understand I have products and services to quickly deploy? Don't you understand the market demands? Why are you not pragmatic? I think that's the challenge, is the pragmatism of understanding where the business is growing, what pressures are on them, and then aligning that message. So my approach always has been, and what I encourage people to do is understand the business which you are part of. So simple, but yet so hard, right? What is bringing in the revenue? What are the products, the applications, the technology areas in your environment that support the revenue, that support the core mission of the organization? Have you ever read the financial report of your company, the annual general report of your company? If you have, great. Have you understood how your work relates to that? Right? I mean, having that mindset is such a key part because cybersecurity teams don't engage with business as much as they should. When they're engaging outside of their teams, they typically talk to IT people, not to the business. And I think that's where the problem arises. The other thing to recognize is contextualizing the threats and the controls in cybersecurity back to the business goals. So as an example, if you are an e-commerce company and you have a massive internet-facing presence, that's where your revenue comes in from. For you, the availability of your internet-facing assets is absolutely the key. And I think you want to focus there. But if you are an organization that is not as heavy on the internet presence, but you do more business-to-business transactions, or you have database such as health clinics, which have really material information that can affect people's lives, the integrity of that is so much more important. The confidentiality of that, the availability of the web-facing assets, because they're static websites largely, is less of a concern for you. So depending on the business line you are in, the threats that matter to you are different. And the security controls that you want to deploy in response to that are different. And I think that's what we want to articulate that. We want to articulate to our businesses the risk. That's the language they understand. What is the risk of an activity and how do you bring down that risk? Articulating that in the way of finances, make it even more prudent, is we can easily say, right? I mean, if you engage effectively, you will have a good way to say with a reasonable degree of accuracy, you can give a range if you want to, of here is the amount of money that we collect via our payments website every single day. Worst case scenario, by the virtue of us not patching it appropriately or not by training or investing in recovery and response, we have a risk, a worst case scenario of our website being down for 30 days with no material way to effectively collect that money efficiently. Now, that's a revenue you actually can present as a real risk because it's real. People understand that. And then you can start understanding, okay, hypothetically throwing out a number, say it's a $30 million loss that you can potentially have. And then you articulate, well, by investing in these 5 tools, in these 5 processes, by these 2 people, it's going to take you circa 20 million, but it's going to bring down the risk, the worst case scenario, to a more manageable risk level. I think just having these practical conversations are such an important aspect of what we do. So that's one part. The other part is the engagement side, which is the pragmatic side. Empathize with your business stakeholders. Understand why they are the way they are. Why are they not patching? Why are they not responding to your pen test finding? Is it because they don't care? Or is it because they don't understand? Or is it because they have other priorities? How can you help them? Are your reports, are your standards, are your positions pragmatic? Are they keeping in touch with the reality of the world we live in today? Or were they built for a world where people weren't working from home or remotely or hybrid, and everybody was in a corporate environment in a nice perimeter where you could just secure it that way? The world's changed. We need to change. People are engaging with things such as ChatGPT. It's fascinating to them. Rather than trying to stop that from happening, educate them on secure adoption of those things. Highlight those risks, make it real to people. Don't just rely on this boring one-time training exercise, that people have to take when they take a new job because there are 20 of those trainings they probably need to do, and they're just kind of clicking through it, right? If that's your way of relying on an awareness training or making a people secure, that's a problem. So I think there are multifaceted issue. This one is, I always distill it back simply to your business cares about, have I invested appropriately? Am I getting value on my return in terms of my investments with regards to cybersecurity? What are my risks? What am I the most at? What is the biggest threat to me? Cybersecurity needs to articulate our reports, our messaging, our initiatives with those things in mind. And I think that's when we can start to bridge that divide.
Very well said, Chirag. And you put that in very simple terms, right? You started with value for money. I think that's the first thing which goes into the minds of the decision makers. Right. Second, you also spoke about the risk, and I think they will understand the risk better than telling them the binaries or configurations, or we have this vulnerability, or the CVE number, right, may not relate to them at all. And I think the very important thing of all these is the third thing which you spoke of, the engagement. Understand their problem, understand their context, right? So one of the things I always keep asking is, should we be teaching our cybersecurity folks and the IT folks business? Right? So I think sometimes we don't, right? So we tend to hire more of IT graduates or people who specialize in technology, and we bring them on board. Is that a problem which we need to talk? Is that something which would, if we address, would it make this divide shrink? Chirag, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very important point, right? So I think the engagement, so it's fine if somebody has an IT background. It is fine if they come from a networking background and a big part of the job involves having that knowledge. That's okay. I think it's a mindset shift though. So which is why one of the books that I recently published was 7 Rules to Become Exceptional at Cybersecurity. And in that, I dedicated a full chapter to the idea of differentiating skills. And it starts with that business mindset. So you don't have to know all of how your business functions, but you need to know enough about what matters the most, especially if you work in organizations where you come in, you get a laptop, and you're going to be in a room or at home, and you're asked to work on, fine, fix this database issue, or go ahead and start deploying the security tool, or configure this endpoint protection solution. So you're just there. That's your headspace. That's what you've been given. But you need to take a step back. And this is where sometimes your managers may not be equipped at this stage because they are learning too, and they need to perhaps grow. But if you know, and if you have kind of got that message, you will ask those questions. So hold on, we're deploying this tool, right? what are the critical assets that we need to deploy on? Why are they critical assets? Do they go back to getting us the revenue we need? No, organizations like CEOs usually have their forums that they publicly talk to people. If they don't, there are their manager level folks who do that, their executive teams who do that, the business side. Attend some of those sessions. Take a proactive interest. At the very least, go on your company's website and go through the products and go through some of the reports. You'll get something there, right? So then you can start to combine that aspect of your work there. So it's what I've seen work well is you can have some roles that are engagement focused roles, like the business information security officers. That role has become very prominent. And that role plays a key part in bridging that divide, because by so, some organizations may call it something else too. Some may have a different name for it, engagement leads, cyber business partners. But the function is these folks are embedded with the business lines. So they that play that role of, they know cyber, but they're mainly business representatives in security meetings. And I think that makes a big difference, because as a CISO, you have so much going on of keeping up with the latest threat, of keeping up with the latest regulation, of dealing with your board and executive demands, that sometimes you may not really be focused on ensuring that your things are fit for purpose. But that's where, when you have a trusted person who is representing the business come and tell you, what, this policy is not working for my business. It's just not. My business does not understand, because you guys, anytime we have to start a business application, or have an application to build or to deploy, we have to do a security check, but all you guys do is a penetration test at the end, which is really expensive. So you need to articulate the value proposition, and money and efficiencies are how you're going to get that message across. And if you tell people, look, by spending, just making up numbers here, by spending $1,000, if you engage us early to do a threat model, to do a review, to understand what you're trying to build, and putting security controls up front, that's all you need. But if you wait till the end and there is a penetration test report, and then you got to go and fix things retrospectively and you risk delays, that number 1,000 could change to 100,000 very quickly. And if it were to be breached, by the way, that number would go beyond 100,000. So I think if you just articulate that at every juncture involving security early is for your own benefit, is good. But then security has to understand that too. And I think that's why that business information security officer is a powerful role. Ideally, a CISO should be able to do that, but CISOs are not all the same. And I don't blame them, because some organizations have a CISO and a team of 1 or 2, and some have the luxury of having a larger team, and they can actually have this conversation. Some are doing everything themselves. So it's hard. Don't get me wrong, I understand the challenges. But that's what I said is the burnout we see in the cybersecurity industry, the relentless pressures that teams are under, the frustrations that they go through, that even funded projects can't make it far because of the resistance they get from the business. I've seen those problems. And that's what I say, is to break out of that. You can't expect business to become security experts overnight. That's not their job. Your job is to explain them in a way they understand. If they don't care, that's a different problem, right? That's a cultural issue. And that's an issue which needs fixing beyond what a security team can do. Because if a CEO does not care, I think that's a problem. But that's not usually the case. Usually the case is they just don't understand, because you're not talking to them in a language that makes sense. So I think we got to train our people with that mindset in mind. We got to train them to think in options. So when I say think in options, is if you are going to ask for money to perhaps, let's pick an example of upgrade your web application firewall that protects your internet-facing assets, right? You want to upgrade them or you want to install them. Don't say in your business case, web application firewall, I want $100,000. What does that even mean? Right? Like, that is not going to make sense to them. You need to think in terms of, what is this trying to do? What is the objective? The objective is our business relies heavily on our payment platforms and internet-facing assets to bring in the revenue, deliver services. Web application firewall is a really important control that can help reduce the threat and will help us to quickly maintain our resilience, even if we were under attack, which means we can continue our services and keep getting these thousands of dollars that we get every day. If you say it that way, that will get some understanding. But you still need to have options. Option is 1, you don't upgrade. What happens? What is the worst case scenario? Option 2 is you upgrade. Option 3 is, well, you actually upgrade and you have a supportability plan that goes long term. present these three options, because security cannot tell you yes or no. I'm not a believer in security saying yes or no. It's in giving people options, giving them a thought process to make educated risk decisions. So I think that's where thinking in options helps people. Business mindset, thinking in options, storytelling. Storytelling is not Hollywood, right? We're not trying to create a Hollywood story here, but a message of having some articulation of making it interesting to people. Don't show up with these reports which are 50-page long and you're lost, right? Summarizing things quickly. If you're presenting something, have a story to it. What's the message? What do I really need to care about? Start there and then go in the details later. Don't wait till your 30th slide. Hopefully, don't have 30 slides. A good storytelling shouldn't have more than 10 to 12 slides ever. I think that's another thing aspect of it. I'll also say brand building and networking. Now, brand building and networking is not just for sales. It's not just as an influencer. It's actually for your security teams to be an ally, to be very visible to your business, available to them to share messages with them. And being present, your business knows how to find you, and your friendly face they can approach. Somebody pragmatic they would like to deal with, and not somebody who's going to tell them no. Hey, even we don't like people to tell us no all the time. Why would we like to deal with them, right? If every time I go to you and Sujit, your answer is no, at some point I'm like, there's no point talking to Sujit. The answer is always no. I'll try to figure something else out, right? So I think that is the brand building aspect of it. And then also say, have your emotional intelligence about you, of having that empathy is such a key part of reading the room, of not just going in, all guns blazing, that you know best, you know exactly what the business should do. Well, actually, no, you may not. You have one part of the picture to solve, it's a bigger picture that you may not have. So having that empathy, having that emotional intelligence, the smartness of self-awareness, of recognizing it. So I think if you have these different trading skills, it makes you a better professional. It makes you a more valuable professional. Here's a soundbite, right? The way I think about it is there are four things a good cybersecurity program should have: accountability, relevance, culture, measurements. Everything that I've spoken to you so far relates to one of these four attributes. If you have these four attributes, you're good. And with measurements, you already talked about financials, but measurements and metrics, it's important that they are fit for purpose for who you're talking to. If you're talking to technology teams, metrics such as vulnerabilities, metrics such as the number of tickets and SLAs, all of them are quite relevant. If I'm talking to the board and the business stakeholders, though, those are not the metrics I want to take. I want to take very straightforward metrics on the percentage of our critical assets that are covered by technologies, of the cyber risks that we currently have, of our maturity level and the benchmarking that exists against the industry. How are we spending compared to the others? How are we on track to others to attain that progress journey? I think all of those things make a compelling conversation there in terms of measuring. Because if I'm able to talk to my board or my execs and show them that by investing, how are we improving our posture and how that improves over a period of time. Not everything will happen today, but what is the story like? What is my cybersecurity journey? I think that's such a key part. So hopefully I've covered different aspects of what it takes and what you need to start thinking to be an effective cybersecurity professional.
Right. You made it look so simple, right? What you actually narrated, I can actually, put it in two words: engagement and culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
These two put together will define the organization culture. How? Where we ensure accountability, being relevant, and of course the measures you spoke of, right? So you need to have different types of measures and matrix depending on the audience. You can't use one size fits all.
No.
Right. And the other interesting thing which you spoke about, and I think the HR fraternity globally adopted HR business consultants or practitioners, right? So they had these HR professionals in the business. So they moved away from, of course, they had a central function, but those individuals were there functioning as part of those teams. They understood the business, they understood the needs, and they also understood, okay, what is that they needed to do in order to be able to achieve the organization's, the major objectives. So I think that's something the cybersecurity fraternity should start thinking about, do we just function alone with the CISOs and then have a few security experts? Or should we now transform from that to having a business, you call it the BISO, right? So the business information security officers. So I think that would also bridge the gap and reduce that divide. And I just want to move on to something else, right? And this is something more organizations, I would say, traditionally do it as a checklist item. Have you done an awareness? Right? Everybody would want to, before the audit comes, they would have a countdown and they would ensure the whole organizations has sat through their awareness sessions. Now, one of the questions, and I'm going to get a perspective of yours while I share my perspective. One of the questions I ask the participants, when was the last time you read the policy? Have you read the policy? Everybody would say, yes, we have read the policy. So when was the last time you read the policy? They're still thinking. So I said, okay, I don't want an answer right here, but tell me, when was the last time you read your appointment letter? All right, so, or your engagement letter. And they would always say, at the time that the letter was being handed over. So what did you look for in it? The term, what is the duration? What is the take home? So I always draw their attention and say, hey guys, have you ever considered or wondered whether there's a clause with respect to confidentiality and adhering to the organization policies? And that's like, okay, yeah, we remember, but we never did it. So that's being discussed at two levels. One, at an engagement offer letter, and then you have the organization policies, which are existing in the organization, which probably get updated and revised from time to time. Right? So you have actually had the opportunity of working in different cultural environments, in different geographies, interacting with different people at different stature. The question to you is cybersecurity awareness still relevant?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. It can be. It can be. But the way we are doing it now is not working. So why do we talk about awareness? To me, it's a human factor, right? I mean, I want to call it the human factor more than awareness, because report after report tells us this, including the Verizon report recently, that over 80% of cybersecurity incidents occur because of the human factor, right? So we've known this for a while. Then this has been historically the challenge. It's not just this one report. So with that, if we know that, then we recognize that cybersecurity is fundamentally a human problem, not a technology issue necessarily. So we really need to focus on our humans and our people. Now, the problem that you articulate is very nice. Is like, okay, it's perceived as a compliance exercise, right? It's not really focused on behavior change. Because if it's a human change that you want to have, you want to change behaviors. You want to fundamentally change how people behave, how they think, how they approach, how they act. Because just because you know something won't mean you act. You may know that eating too much sugar is bad for you, but you still may eat it, right? So it's not necessarily that awareness of you should eat less sugar. It's actually the behavior change of how are you going to do it? Are you actually going to pass on that cookie and instead eat a carrot? Will you actually do it? I think that's the behavior change you want to come to. So awareness of cybersecurity, in my view, has never been higher. Everybody, I think if I think about the world now compared to even as recent as 5-7 years ago, the word cybersecurity, the documentaries made on it, there are Netflix movies, that people are generally aware of these things, of these scams, of all the stuff happening. They are aware of hackers. It's what can they do about it? So to me, it comes back to the idea of you need to think of cybersecurity training awareness as fundamentally a key risk that you need to address. It's not a nice to have, it's not a compliance exercise. It's the make or break between your organization being secure or being at risk. I think that's a big contribution to it. So there are ways you can do it. So the first thing is you got to stop making cybersecurity scary for people. fear does not work long-term. Psychology studies, neuroscience has shown us this, that long-term behavior change cannot be driven by fear. Fear can get some attention in the short term, but long-term, it does not work to change, influence behavior. What works is positive reinforcements, is aspirations, is connecting yourself to a purpose. And which is what I always kept saying is connect yourself to the business of the purpose you're trying to serve. And that can help because you actually understand. The other thing is making cybersecurity real to people. That is, make it personal to people. Everybody, no matter what their job titles are, they are chief information security officers of their own homes. The safety and well-being of their families and kids online rely on them to be smart about these things. If we teach them to be safe at home, they will bring in work practices that are secure as well. So I think we need to make it personal to people. We make it real to people. Stop talking just about data and assets and all of that. Important, yes, but make it about real people, real things, real emotions. If there's an identity theft, there are real emotions at play. There's real stress people go through. There is real anguish when people lose money. So bring it down to that emotional, connect to people at that level because that brings a change behavior. And studies are telling us this all the time. So as an example, you are now starting to see a shift away from, I used to see even messages in Australia here in the trains where, they have shifted now from saying, fines for non-tickets that may exist from time to time, but they're changing to a more good behavior of 9 out of 10 people travel with a ticket, right? They're saying that. That means you're one of the few who is not doing it, right? A subtle change. And actually, there was a great study and a TED talk as well by Dr. Tali Sharad, and she actually brought this really well. But there's actually a graph where I'm happy to share as a show note, where you see from an age of human lifespan of how bad news versus good news works to change behavior. And I think this is where you start to see that people who are at the middle age or older, the fear factor works worse for them. But these are the people who lose the most money. And which is why we are communicating in the worst way to people who need it the most. So I think we gotta recognize that. Other things we gotta do is actually focus on role-based training and just-in-time training. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You gotta make training interesting. Let's have some humor in it. Let's use some analogies in it, right? Like I've used in my slides different things from, having a little puppy show up with a toothbrush and a towel, cute little puppy. And I say, well, as cute as this dog is, you're not going to use the same toothbrush to brush your teeth and his. Why use the same password for your bank and some random website? It's just something subtle, gets a message. You can have a picture of a pirate with an eye patch, right? And say, patches aren't just for pirates. You should patch your systems. Just get some humor in it, right? Get some attention from people because ultimately it's an engagement game. In this world of distraction that we live in, focus is our superpower. So focus is our superpower. So we need to get people to focus on what we want the behavior to change. So I always advise people, break it down to 2 or 3 behavior changes you want in your organization. Awareness of everything is fine, whatever, right? You want to talk. But what are the 2 or 3 behavior changes you want? One could be, well, if you're if you're starting off with a lower base, phishing emails, right? I want them to be able to recognize phishing emails properly and report, because just recognizing and deleting is not helping others, right? So report. Other behavior could be, I'm really concerned about data loss prevention. I want everybody to label anything sensitive with our tool that we have. Okay, that's the behavior you want to change. I'm really concerned about my developers not writing secure code because we rely so much on custom code and self-developed application. Okay, so you want to change your behavior of writing secure code. You need to have these 3 or 4 behaviors and then relentlessly focus on that with what I call the SMART approach. SMART's been around forever, by the way, guys. It's been around, a goal-setting techniques from way back in the 80s, I imagine. Is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. So let's pick the example of phishing I just mentioned. If I were to be designing a phishing program, I'll have a SMART metric. SMART metric is specific. Within 3 months of rolling out my phishing awareness training, the reporting rate on phishing emails will increase by 20% in my organization, right? So a SMART metric. Why? It's specific. I'm saying that it's focused on identifying suspicious emails and reporting them. Is measurable because I've said 20%. Achievable, there's a way to collect that information because I know how many people will report it because I have it had in my statistics. It's relevant because I care about that social engineering risk as being a key risk for me. And it's time bound. It's 3 months. It's not forever. So in 3 months, if I don't see the change, something's got to change on my side. So we can't have these programs that go on forever, compliance-based exercises that influence no behavior change and nowhere to measure that. And if you notice, I didn't talk about click rate. I didn't talk about number of people clicking on phishing emails. I actually said the reporting rate because I want to care that people should be proactive. They should care about their fellow beings, not just about, oh, I've secured myself by deleting this email, I'm okay. No, report it. That's driving positive behavior. That's a good culture. A good culture is where people are comfortable reporting things, knowing that there is psychological safety, knowing that even if they made a mistake, they reported something very quickly to help people. I think that's a culture when you build, where the blame game is not existing, is actually about learning and growing. I think that's the culture shift. So these are the ways we want to change from awareness to behavior, from boring one time to just in time, relevant, role based, time bound, from detached and just corporate speak to emotions and actually making it personal. I think if you make that transition, you start to see awareness work very differently.
Chirag, the transition is cultural, right? And I think the strong message of all what you said, fear is short term. Long term, it doesn't help. And I can testify for that. And we've seen it in the recent pandemic as well. When it started setting in, there was so much of fear. Today, people don't care. So the messaging was, as you rightly said, was more on the fear, but not in terms of good behaviors. And I think it should be measurable, smart. So I think if we make those language shift from a negative to positive, I think we would have more positive results achieved throughout the organization. Right. So that's one point I would like to emphasize. And I think you also mentioned about repeatedly, I heard you talk about emotions, intelligence. And I think that sometimes very little attention is paid to that. And many times people walk in wanting to have a conversation. And even before they could start, few sentences, few words, and the other person overrules and says, hey, this is what I want you to do. They've not heard the full story. So again, the person trying to do something positive goes back to his desk or her desk and starts doing things which probably says, okay, I'm expected to do a job. Let me do that. May not be the right thing. So I think it doesn't provide an opportunity for people to make course corrections and become an agile organization. We talk about agile software development, agile this, agile that, and I think every good security program should be agile. Right? So you make course corrections as you evolve. Sometimes you have made a decision to invest or do something, but halfway into the project, you may find that's not what you need actually. I think we need to have the courage to go back to the senior leadership, the C-suite, and tell them, guys, this doesn't seem to work. And I think, again, that fear of telling people that that decision was not a correct decision, or it was a correct decision at that point in time, but is no longer relevant. And having that courage to have that discussion is the ownership is with the senior leadership to make that environment. So that again, a cultural shift where they allow people to express their mind. It doesn't have to be authoritarian all the time. Okay, there are certain times you've got to have the authority and enforce it. But I guess people should be flexible to change when need arises. And I'm just going to go back to something in terms of profession, the cybersecurity profession, right? I've been reading a lot of articles at recent times, A lot of security professionals are saying they're stressed out. And some are even considering moving away. And I know a few people have decided to move away from the profession and said there are better things to do. And one of the root causes they report is the number of incidents. Right? And the last report, which was released by IBM last year, they said it takes approximately about 280 to 290 days to detect an incident. So that means every person had 10 months, approximately 10 months to detect it. But then to fix it, it takes another 80 to 90 days. So that's another 3 months. So in all, we are talking about 12 to 13 months to address one single incident, and that probably will have spiraling effect. What would your advice be? One, in terms of to enjoy the work they have to do, and for those people who are aspiring to come into the profession. What are your thoughts, Chirag, on this?
Yeah, it's a tough area, and you're right. Like, reports are telling us its numbers are not looking good when it comes to mental health of cybersecurity professionals. I think there are several things that I want to address. It's a multifaceted problem, right? There's not a one simple answer to it. So we started by first, the way I think about any stress in life is, there are two things. One is, what can I control? What I can't control. Focusing on what we control is what's in our hand. If we at least do all of that, that usually helps quite a bit. And recognizing what we can't control, accepting it. I think that goes a fair way. So how does that relate to cybersecurity? What can we control as cybersecurity professionals? Well, we can control how all the stuff that we mentioned so far in this conversation is relevant, right? Have we engaged business appropriately? Have we designed our priorities properly? Have we, to your such a great point of going back and course correcting where we needed to, of being transparent? Because I think that's just a key bit of the transparency of what's wrong. How can it be solved? I think if you've done all of that, you are in a good position comparatively. Because end of the day, where does the pressure of incident comes from? The pressure of the incident comes from people expecting you to fix something quickly because it's your problem to fix. If, however, the message was not that it's just your problem to fix, it's a collective responsibility of that engagement, of understanding which incident is really important, of triaging them, of being prepared for them, of actually having gone through this tabletop exercises, of the simulated exercises, where you actually had this preparedness tested. When the live thing happens, when the real thing happens, yes, it will be stressful, but you will be more prepared. You have built up that mental resilience, that memory, that muscle memory that gets you prepared to deal with these things. I think that's missing. We are doing a lot, but not really testing. And I'm not talking about technical response plans here. I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about people putting themselves willingly in those situations of these simulated exercises with executives, with their teams, with different teams cross-functionally to play these out. Because if you can prepare for incidents well, knowing that they happen, you are in a better position because you actually won't be as stressed. But then it also goes back to are you effectively talking to your leadership about the resourcing levels that you have and setting those expectations? Okay. The one term I like is establishing protection level agreements with your business, of being very clear with them. For the investment that we are making now, what is the protection level to expect? By the virtue of good metrics, good risks, and good threat measurements, you can demonstrate that currently our investment is short of where it needs to be, which means if an incident were to happen, it would take us, I'm just making up numbers, 45 days to get back to normal. However, if you invest and give me this extra money that I'm looking for, that's an option on the table, I can bring that down to 25 days. But that means I need a person, or I need more tooling, or I need more training, or whatever it might be, right? So I think if you have those conversations, establish that trust early on, you are being more proactive, and that can help some of the burnout. But you see how all of this requires the leaders to start thinking differently. they need to start leading. They need to understand these problems, and the way to fix these problems is culture and engagement. You start there, which is why I said culture and engagement is so big, but it's not the whole thing. I'm also a big advocate of mindfulness, and this is now going not just cyber things, but mindfulness and being aware, being present, and doing things to maintain your energy levels. That health aspect of it is such an important part, right? Like some people like cold showers, some don't, some like breathing exercises, some don't, some like working out, some don't. Whatever it is, but you need to find something that works for you to optimize your health, because your physical health and mental health work well together. So I'll give my example. I love to do martial arts, and I do that because I am a strong believer that it helps for mental health. Being that 1 hour in that position where all I'm focused on is that next move, that next punch, that whatever, I'm away from any other thought. That's meditation in its own right. And that helps your mental strength so much because you are requiring to that. So I think we need to get beyond, these ad hoc spotty things and recognize the physical mental connection. We need to address the culture. We need to be more prepared. I think that's the key thing which is missing. So the numbers that you mentioned, the mean time to contain being such a large part, I think there are several variables to that. One is our capability and capacity still not catching up. So there are, this is sadly, some organizations are not at that point yet. But for those who are, I encourage you to think about threat intelligence, about threat hunting, about proactive incident testing measures, because that will help you reduce this time, but more importantly, raise your muscle memory. If you've been through the exercise 5 times, the next time when it actually happens, you'll be much better off. So I think those are different aspects that come to it. But we also, like, for the future generations, or for folks who are aspiring to come into cybersecurity, I think having us collectively think very smartly about how we make it more inclusive, both with regards to writing job descriptions, to interviewing people, of bringing them in and giving them the safe space to grow. I think all of that is a key. You can't expect to suddenly, make people experts when they're making lateral moves from different careers. You need to give them that space, but you also need to attract them with a more welcoming environment. I know you have pressures because you have to deliver. I understand that. I've been there where you have to deliver, so you just don't have time. But understand that if you don't build that out, you're going to be in that vicious cycle all the time. So I think that's how we can help. But I also think be smart about your sourcing models. When I say that is, be smart about when you engage vendors, about managed service providers. You don't have to do all of it yourself. You probably shouldn't do all of it yourself. You should have business partners internally, like I mentioned, with different teams like privacy, risk, and all of them. But also external, you need to have that relationship. So some services, such as commodity services, so this is my opinion, I think pen testing is a fairly commodity service. Threat intelligence in some cases could be a service you could consume. Other services which you feel are more commodity, go and leverage the marketplace. Be smart about it. Don't try to build an empire in house, because it's going to be really hard to retain people, to hire people, to maintain that. So I think there's areas where the market gives you better value. Go and do it while you build an internal capability, if that's what you desire. But if you're deciding to build something internal, be very methodical about that. So I think sometimes I feel people not engaging with vendors. Oh, vendors come and sell me stuff all the time. I think that mentality exists. I used to have that at one point. But what changed in my mind is when I started to engage with good people, of people who are wanting to build relationships with you, not to make a quick sale, but to have this longer term partnership. You learn a lot from them because you see what's happening in the marketplace. You listen to stories of how others are tackling the same problem. I think that gets you really far. And the power of associations that you and I both part of, ISC Squared, ISACA, they are such powerful in their own right, because they give you that community, that professional network, that support, that you're not alone in this. I think all of that is a collective well-being. I've seen studies that show the biggest reason why people die and why the people are depressed is, simply put, loneliness, right? I think loneliness is a problem. And in cyber, sometimes it can feel like a lonely battle. You're not alone. That these communities exist. Engage with them. Don't be lazy. Don't feel like you just, oh, well, what's the point? It's not about, oh, I know everything about cyber. That's not the point of these communities. The point is not that you will learn new every single thing. The point is you'll have a community to lean on and rely on. And that has helped me so much in my career. So, yeah, look, not a simple answer, but these different aspects collectively can make a difference.
Chirag, a lot of good points for people to think through, right? And if they were to action all what you have said, and I guess in a short period of time, they would actually have a good program and very especially to bridge that divide, reduce it, right? It may not go away overnight. The highlight is don't fight the battle alone, right? Because we don't know what the battle is. It's an unknown battle, right? And what we see is the result of that battle, the impact. An incident is a result of something else. And you very rightly said, embed protection level agreements. And we talk about SLAs, and it's mostly with external parties, with the customers or our vendors. But I think that protection level agreements within the organization and what is set going to take to achieve those levels is where you're going to have a conversation with your other departments. Finance, HR, procurement, manufacturing, supply chain. And I can, list down various departments. And all of them, they would always, the first instance they think about is, okay, it's an IT. Okay, the moment they hear a word IT, it's IT department. We have nothing to do with it. But the moment you start talking about these protection level agreements, it would bring them to that conversation. And I think that is where we would make our position known to them, saying, this is our expectation in order to provide you the return on investment. Some investments may not be quantifiable in terms of the returns, but you would definitely not have a negative return on investment. Right? And I think that's a thought I would like people to take home from the points which you mentioned. And last but not the least, mental and physical health. Right? And many times the professionals who function in this space, they tend to be working in their own space. Right? So when they're dealing from the physical world, they're mentally engaged, they're preoccupied with work, and probably with not knowing they will be building their own empires, not leveraging in the ecosystem. Right? So there are several talents out there in partners, right? So we have to identify those partners, not one-off, but long-term partners. And I'm aware of organizations that they are leveraging on those mindsets, right? So Chirag, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you. I learned a lot, and it actually was very refreshing. Some of those things which you mentioned, I'm going to take back and, reinvent them. Right? Some of those are known to us, but sometimes, it takes a backseat, right? It does not take any importance because you just caught up in that day-to-day run. So I'm sure I benefited talking to you. I'm sure the people who are listening to this conversation will not listen just once, and I'm sure they're going to listen to this over and over again. And I'm also going to take this clip and share it with those people who I know who have not attended this session today. You're trying to say something, Chirag.
No, I was just saying that's very kind of you, and I have really enjoyed this conversation, and this is it never felt like an interview or anything. This is a discussion, and with your rich experience, Sujith, in the field and having met people, and I think collectively us spreading this message more is such an important part of where we can make a difference, and we can learn from each other. To your point, sometimes you think but you've forgotten that in day-to-day grind. So
absolutely,
I really enjoyed it, and hopefully it can make a difference. Even if it makes a difference to one person, this conversation would have been worthwhile.
Absolutely, it has already made a difference to me, and I'm sure that's something for you to take it with you. And I'm going to come back and tell you how many other people benefited in my circle, right? So that was Chirag Joshi, founder and CEO, 7 Rules Cyber. And I also encourage all of you, if you have the opportunity, to buy his book, right? It's worth reading it, and it's worth keeping it as a radio reckoner, right? And it's written in very simple language anybody can understand. And I think it is relevant for everyone who use technology. I'm not singling out the security professionals. Everyone who uses technology, I'm sure you will benefit reading that book. So with that note, this is me, Sujith Christy, President ISC Squared Colombo chapter, signing off, and see you in another session. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.